Connor, are you going to help with the engine today? What do you think? What if I take this ball instead? Oh, get it! Alright guys, after 2 years of working on this thing, I'm going to try to fire it up today, which is kind of exciting and kind of terrifying. But before I do anything, I have to get all my fluids put in the engine and the radiator and stuff. So I'm going to fill it with coolant or water. Power steering fluid will go in there. And most importantly, obviously, would be the motor oil. And to do that, most people would probably just put oil into this filler here and then fill it up and then just kind of pull a fuse on the ignition or whatever and just crank it over and let the oil pump build pressure through the engine. But that means that my bearings will be sitting dry, and they've been sitting for about 4 years, like I said, and I don't really want to have that much metal on metal contact. So what I'm going to do is actually use a kind of a homemade oil luber or pre-oiler system using a chemical sprayer. This one I got from Home Depot. It was about $14. I just modified it a little bit with a little valve here and then a tube that goes up to a plug on the oil galley, which is like this guy right there. And that will basically let me build up enough oil pressure, hopefully, in theory, to get oil pumping through here, up through there, and then I can get, if it works, enough oil pressure to put oil through all of the lines and stuff to the top of the engine. And I need to make sure I'm just cranking over the crankshaft pulley by hand to make sure all of the oil holes are getting properly lubed. So that'll be kind of fun. I hope it works out. So if this works the way it's supposed to, I'll start pumping up my handle here, which will bring fluid up to this valve and then stop. And as I build up enough pressure, I can open the valve and it'll shoot through, not shoot through, it'll slowly push through to the engine, but it'll be at high enough pressure that it should, in theory, start pressurizing oil throughout the engine. Oh.
There it goes, see?
I see it. So my mom is here actually, and she just told me, I got schooled by my mom. I had this valve closed, so I was pumping and nothing was coming out because it was not letting the pressure go through. So my mom was like, hey idiot, make sure you open the valve. So I opened the valve and the oil comes out. So thank you, Mom, behind camera. She won't say hi, but she's back there.
I didn't call you an idiot.
Alright, so I'm gonna keep pumping and then open this valve up, and hopefully this should be enough pressure to push it up into the engine. And there it goes. I can hear the oil actually squirting through the engine. It's kind of cool. So this confirms two things. One, the oil pressure gauge definitely works, and two, this method of getting oil pressurized and into the engine also works. Well, with the engine oil all filled up, the next thing we got to fill up here is the coolant system. And the LS engine is kind of different because the water pump is separate from the engine and it's up front here. And sometimes, depending on how high it is compared to the radiator, it's a good idea to take off the upper hose and pour all your coolant directly in here. That way it fills up the water pump first, and then from there it can go down to the radiator and then fill the rest of it all the way up. A lot of the Formula Drift and Pro-Am drift leagues require you to do water only for your cooling system. So I'm going to use some very cheap distilled water right now, at least to get it started, and then I'll decide later on if I want to put in actual coolant or whatever, but for now, distilled water is the best way to go. Now, of course, you don't need to have the power steering fluid installed for the engine to turn on and run, but because I have my accessory belt on here and it's going to go around my power steering pump, I figured it would just be a good idea to have fluid in there just to keep it lubricated. So the next step was to add fuel into my fuel tank, and as I did this, I realized that fuel started pouring out of the tank under the car. So I pulled the tank out to figure out what was going on. So what I found out here is that if you can look very closely, you can see a little gap in between the tank metal and this metal piece right here, and that little gap right there is what's leaking on both there and on these fittings. So I'm going to go through and seal them up with our friend JB Weld, and hopefully that won't be a problem anymore. So there we have the cured JB Weld. It seems to be working, so I'll get this thing dried out and back in the car again. Well, we're in the middle of a heat wave here in Southern California, but I want to get this thing ready to go to the track as soon as possible, so I'm going to get my clutch fluid filled up here. Now I'm using DOT 4 synthetic Castrol fluid. You can really use any synthetic fluid, preferably .4. Don't use .5. I've heard bad things about .5, so I'm going to use .4. This is not a racing fluid. This is a standard .4 synthetic. Later on, I might go to a racing fluid if I have to. But what I'm going to do is use my bleeder, my remote bleeder line here. I'm just going to put this for now into the top of an empty oil bottle. So the process here is pretty simple. You just fill up your reservoir with your fluid, you pump the clutch pedal a bunch of times until the air comes out over here, and then when you start getting fluid coming out of here, you close that off. You have a friend, in my case it was my fiance who didn't want to be on film, pump a bunch of times and then hold pressure, and then you release this and air and fluid comes out. And then you repeat that process until nothing but fluid comes out. Then you lock this off, top that off, and then you put the top on. I'm not sure where I put the top, right here. And top goes on just like this, and then you are done. This stuff is super corrosive, so using a funnel is highly suggested. As it pumps, you can hear the air coming out of the bleeder end, which is what you want, because you want fluid in and air out. Well, that was kind of a long break, but I'm now back, and I think it's pretty good. I just had some help getting this thing bled again with my buddy Aaron from 802 Garage and Focus. He's in town. Actually, he's in the middle of a cross-country trip, and he decided to stop by and say, hey, and maybe do some wrenching on the car that I've actually been ignoring for 3 months because I was doing, you know, some important stuff. I went and got married, as you can see. Well, that's actually about it. I got married.
Took a lot of time.
If you guys don't know 802 Garage, Aaron is a huge supporter of Fully Spooled and has been for a super long time.
I think I've commented on like every video.
Yeah, I can't thank him enough for helping me out so much. Just with, you know, getting the word out about my channel and that kind of fun stuff. And he's got a lot of really cool projects. He's currently putting a V10 into a Subaru, which is going to be kind of insane. When's that going to happen?
When I get home, actually, is the test fit. So, like, it's ready to, I have all the parts now, and it's just, like, it's on an engine crane. I just have to winch the 2.5 RS back into the garage, and then kind of, I'm going to make, like, a little edit, I think.
That'll be easy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just a test fit.
Just pop it in. Just pop it in there.
We'll see what needs to be clearanced, and then we'll make mounts, and then we'll clearance for the transmission, and then we'll...
So literally just pop it in.
Yeah.
You're good to go.
Turnkey.
I mean, what, Summit sells mounts, right? For the Dodge V10 engine into a Subaru?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
they're
easy.
like $40.
Yeah, no problem. We just got the clutch bled properly. Actually, it's pretty close to being bled properly. We just needed to do one last little bleed.
I think you had it, but we just hooked up this rubber hose, and I had him pump it so that I could see the fluid come out. There was like maybe little pinprick bubbles, but it filled this whole line with clean fluid. So I think it's good.
Awesome. Next thing we gotta do is make sure that the master cylinder is adjusted properly. So we're gonna turn the car on and engage the clutch with first gear, and then we're gonna wait until the rear tires start spinning.
Basically, the wheels are gonna spin, and then when you push in the clutch, they should stop spinning just due to the friction of the drive shaft and the rear diff and the axles and everything. And if they don't, it means your clutch is still partially engaged. So we just need to keep adjusting the rod out until where you're pushing it all, where you're pushing the clutch in all the way, fully releases the clutch disc and the wheels stop spinning, and that's how you know when you're sitting there idle you're not just slipping your clutch.
So if Aaron pushes the clutch pedal in, this should stop spinning.
All the way down.
It's in and it's not spinning, so we assume that the clutch master cylinder is not correctly adjusted. So now we're going to adjust the clutch master cylinder rod until the pedal comes out enough to disengage the clutch. Hopefully that's going to be as simple as what we're trying to say. So we adjusted the rod on the master cylinder out far enough now that when I push the pedal all the way in, the rear tires stop moving. So the nice thing about that now is all I need to do is just adjust this rod in again and keep pushing the pedal in until the wheels just start to move when it's in, and then out a little bit more, and that should be good. Okay.
And you might be able to hear it on camera, but you can actually hear the clutch chattering when he pushes it all the way down when the wheels stop, which probably means there's a little bit of extra space because that clutch disc is rattling back and forth, and you don't want that to happen too much. So now I don't hear clutch chattering in. It sounded like the wheels stopped, so we're getting pretty close.
So So now the pedals are all pretty much even. There's no clutch chatter when it goes all the way in, and the wheels are stopped. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely functional.
All right, the engine's off. We're a little high from fumes, I think. But,
it was a little bit gassy in there, but yeah, Jeff was just saying that was remarkably easy, and I commented that basically the concentric slave cylinders only really have one adjustment point, which is the master cylinder rod or the pedal, because the concentric slave just kind of comes out inside the transmission. You can't adjust anything on it, whereas if it was a rod on the slave cylinder, you'd have 2 points basically that are moving. So just one adjustment, and hopefully it's good.
Yep, so hopefully we should be in good shape. I won't know until I get the car actually on the ground and running, but before that there's a lot more stuff to do, namely coilovers, some brake work. I do have some coilovers in this huge mess of crap back in my garage here, but yeah.
Quality car parts.
Anyway, all right, well that's really good. So we just got the clutch bled and taken care of, and then the clutch adjusted. So now we can probably work on some brakes.
Bleed the brakes.
Bleed the brakes. Because what I didn't show on camera actually before is that I installed these super nice, actually really cheap and easy to install stainless steel brake lines.
Those Goodrich?
These are Stop Tech from Amazon for like, I think they're like $60 for the set, which isn't too bad. You can see my rear shocks are completely unhooked back here, and we are at full suspension droop. Once we get the suspension installed, this won't be this tight, it'll all be up and nice and firm. So now we're gonna get some brake fluid in this guy and bleed the brakes, which I'm not gonna film much of that because everyone knows how to bleed brakes, or if you don't, you can Google it. I'm not gonna sit here and say, here's how you do it, because honestly, I'm sure I won't do as good of a job as a lot of other people, like Chris Fix, for example.
Chris Fix, I'm sure, has good videos on bleeding brakes. Hey guys, Chris Fix here to show you how to bleed your brakes and make sure you're safe. Don't use compression fittings.
Alright, so we're just going to go ahead and just bleed these brakes and not really show you a whole lot of it because, I don't know, go Google it. For the clutch and all the brakes.
I mean, you should be good to pump it now. I hear a noise. Yeah, but hold on a sec. No, we're squirting fluid all over the ground in front of the car.
Cool.
Oh, we got fluid. Alright, so go down and then stay down.
Yep, down.
Okay, up.
Okay.
And then down.
Down.
Up.
Up.
Down. That one's the best one for sure, so.
Alright, the brakes have been bled. Thanks again to Aaron for helping me out with that. So that's good to go. The clutch is good to go. So I think fluid-wise, we're pretty much ready to go. All we gotta do now is eventually do the diff fluid, but that's when I do the actual welding. Wow, you are way backlit right now.
Oh yeah? Am I angelic? Anyway, we have a bunch of excess fluid because we wanted to make sure there's no air. Seems pretty solid. It'll get even better when the wheels are on because right now
some of that fluid's pretty nasty too. It's sitting in the brakes for a long time.
It's a bit dark, but it'll get better when the wheels are on because the rotor won't be able to float. But I think he's gonna have good brakes, other than the little slit I made in the line so he crashes.
Oh, thanks. That's good.
But yeah, it'll be good.
That's good to know. So there's fluid in the transmission, coolant, engine, brakes. The last thing I gotta do, like I said, fluid-wise, is to get my differential filled up, but I gotta weld it first, so I gotta take it out first and figure that whole thing out. That'll be coming later on, but for now I think we're good. We're actually gonna do another episode right after this one where we're gonna do our coilovers, or my coilovers I guess, really quick on the SC.
We're gonna get this car fully slammed.
Man, the puns. Alright, stay tuned guys, more coming up pretty soon here. We're gonna get the coilovers installed next episode, and other than that, see you guys soon. Damn it.
Jeff didn't film an outro properly, and he's supposed to tell you that if you like this video you should like it and that you should probably subscribe to Fully Spooled, and he wants me to give his expensive camera back and I'm probably not in focus. Subscribe to Fully Spooled! Subscribe to Fully Spooled! Oh god, there's a gate!